And this is what I believe is the second thing God desires of every man. But you know what? Women are going to be warriors too. And everything we can go down the list, there are just going to be these are things that are going to be more specific towards men, but everything's going to apply to you ladies as well. So everything we read of, every example in Scripture, there's things that you ladies can take home. But also, it will give you things that you should watch for, especially when you're seeking out a mate. And we don't like that term when I use mate. Seeking out a lifetime spouse, husband, wife, you know, same things. A mate. It works. It is much more than mating, but yes, it works. So anyway, so these things, you know, it's not like you girls get to take session 3 off and come back, you know, when we get to session 4, or vice versa on the next session for you guys. There's plenty of things we can learn from, and when I say these things, again, I'm not saying men have to be like this and women can't do this, and vice versa, okay? So just, you know, these are just generalities. I believe this. I'm trying to paint a picture of a godly man and a godly woman for you. Okay, I think it would be really nice is that if we lived at a time of peace in the world, it'd be really nice if we could say, hey, you know what, everything in the world is just how it's supposed to be, so let's just party and have fun for the rest of our lives. But the reality is that we were born onto a battlefield. We were born for war. Just in case you didn't know that, we were born for war, okay? Especially us men. There is so much that is wrong with the world. Things like abortion, things like child abuse, things like slavery and sex trade, things like millions of people starving and going without clean water. Shocker, you guys probably didn't even know that, huh? While many of us then have way too much of all those things, water and clean water and iPods. The greatest tragedy of all. Anybody remember from the mission trip? I one night this last mission trip this last year, some of you were there, I talked about what the greatest tragedy of all is. Anybody remember what it said?
Sorry.
Oh, wow. And there it is. The greatest tragedy of all. I believe in the world, it's even a worse tragedy than people going without clean water, is that God's creation has turned their backs on Him. And those blanks I left at the top of your page are just for some of those things you can write in, some of the awful tragedies that go on in this world, things I mentioned, like abortion, slavery, and all those things. But the greatest tragedy of all, I believe, is that God creation has turned their backs on Him. God created because He loved us people. He created us, and then we just ignore Him. And I believe that all those other problems in the world that we listed, all those awful things, are a result of us turning our back on Him, or us becoming disconnected from God, as we talked about a few months ago at Lyghthouse. All right, so knowing all these things, can we, as people, knowing all these things that go on in the world, can we as people just sit back and do nothing about it? Let me word it this way. Could a person that knows about injustice and does nothing to help be considered a good person? What do you think about that? If you know all these awful things going on in the world and you do absolutely nothing to correct what's wrong, could you be considered a good person? What would you say? Anybody want to comment on that? Get some feedback? Well, if you know that there are things going on in the world, knowing that people need help, and you have the ability to help, but you do nothing about it, could you be considered a good person? Is it your problem?
No.
What's that?
Well, you could be considered a bad person.
You could be considered a bad person for not helping?
If you can.
Yeah.
If you can't do anything about it, I guess you can't do anything about it.
If you can't,
you can,
sure.
but you're not doing anything.
But if you can, yeah.
It's like sitting there watching someone get beat up.
Yep.
Not doing anything about it.
Yep. There was actually, it was a number of years ago, and back in the 90s, I think I was just out of high school. I remember in the news there was something where there was a person on a beach, and just a little ways down, somebody was drowning. And they had no desire to get in the water and help them. And they let them drown. And then people were trying to sue them for not helping. He was saying, it's not my problem. And I think you're right. I think there is no obligation. I think there is. I think our laws make it there is no obligation, because if they were to get involved and then somehow you have contact with the person, but the person is still in drowning, then they can be seen as liable.
They have to at least call 911, or they can be sued.
They can.
You have to do something.
No, you don't.
In Minnesota, I'm sure you do.
Well, that would be some interesting research. Do some research and see what you come up with.
I went to school, you know, but
that's cool. Do some research. It would be just interesting. It would be, you know, it would make for a good discussion some night about do we have an obligation to help. And I'd like to see what the laws are. So you do some research, see what you can find out about it. That's fine. That's okay. Why not? But interesting. But even if, depending, the laws of the land may be one thing, but could you be considered a good person if you choose not to help? Actually, there's a few scriptures that would say the opposite, but I didn't.
I don't know, like, what I'd do, because, like, if you ended up, like, saving them and they're, like, passed out already, and they're, like, on the beach, and you, like, try to, like, CPR them, and you, like, break their ribs, couldn't they, like, sue you for hurting them?
No, because you saved their life.
Well, like,
well,
you can, like, people, if you shoot somebody that comes in your house and you don't kill them, they can sue you for shooting them.
Have you seen The Incredibles? Where he saves the guy who jumps off the building and the guy sues him. And all the superheroes have to go into hiding.
Yeah, but they're just
Kind of like that.
Which one?
Incredibles.
Incredibles. Yeah. There was a while back. I took when I was at college. I took for one semester. I did some athletic training courses, considering that's a possible major. And there was a guy who he told the story of his friend who was I guess an athletic trainer or something for a hockey team. And they were in the course of the game. I think somebody's skate somehow slashed.
Oh my gosh.
Something. Slash an artery or something, and the details are foggy, but I remember the main point. Somehow the guy was choking on it. No, it collapsed his esophagus, I think, so he couldn't breathe. And so what the guy did was, I think, made an incision and put a pen down there so that the guy could breathe through the pen like this. What's that?
like the tube of the pen or just the whole pen?
I don't exactly remember the details, but I remember afterward, I mean, basically saved his life. The guy would have been dead very quickly. Afterwards, then the guy tried to sue him because now he has a scar.
Oh, jeez.
Because it wasn't a medical incision, it was something he had to do quickly before so the guy wouldn't die, and the guy then tried to sue him. However, I believe the courts found the guy innocent for saving his life. Okay.
You're protected as long as you, in good faith, try to help somebody in an emergency situation. You can't be sued for that.
Okay. Good. Good to know. Yeah, that's good to know. Let's make for a good discussion. But and even there are scriptures. I did include them here. I guess I wasn't planning to expound at this point in time. But there are scriptures that say, how can you be considered a good person if there's your neighbor needs help and you don't help them? Scripture, yeah. It's in James, I believe. Somebody could look that one up and share.
With that story, how the skate sliced an artery and he was choking, so he had to cut. Wouldn't he have a scar already from the skate cutting him?
I think I was wrong. I think I was mixing a couple different stories. I think somehow he got hit with a stick or something. I think it might have been a pump maybe. And I don't remember. It's been so long. It's been a long time. Yeah, somehow it's just his whatever esophagus got collapsed and he couldn't breathe and so yeah. So interesting. Yeah, that'd be pretty awful. I'd probably take the scar though over dying. Personal take would be.
I would hate doing that so much.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't want to see.
Yeah.
I hate people like that. Like, do something to help them, and then they get mad at you for doing something because they messed up something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I would. Yeah, but we live in a crazy world. We do, and the reality is that there are spirits in this world, and all of us are influenced by spirits, whether we think so or not. It's just the nice thing as believers, we have the Holy Spirit who leads us into righteousness, who leads us into pleasing God. But then everyone else, if they don't have the Holy Spirit, they will be influenced by other spirits. And that's why people do crazy things, because I'm not saying that everybody has demons living inside them, but there are spiritual influences around us. Okay. I believe that in every young man, there is an inborn hunger for adventure and danger. And most of you weren't here a few years ago, and I've used this example every time I talk about this, but Nathaniel and Nathan were two examples of young men like this. There was a stretch there, I think it was back when you guys were maybe in 7th grade or so, 7th or 8th grade. There was a stretch where every week one of them was coming to youth group with like a new injury. It seemed like they were trying to outdo each other for a while. It was pretty crazy. I mean, we could go on and list them, broken bones and all those things. And yeah, and then Nathaniel, you went as far as your job was wired shut for a few months, wasn't it? It was crazy, yeah. Was it a bike injury?
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah.
You didn't get it too?
You just through your teeth, liquids.
Yeah, liquids, yeah.
Lots of Ensure and Boost. Muscle milk.
How many bikes did you go through, have you been through in your life?
You and your bikes.
I know, he's just...
He doesn't hurt himself so much that
Yep.
the bike collapses.
Yep. Yep. And I probably, you know, I probably should, for this, show some pictures. But growing up, I have pictures of me with cowboy guns. I have pictures of me with a shield and a sword my dad had made me. It was a wooden shield and a sword. And I'd run around through, we used to live on kind of a campgrounds, like if you go to like a Bible camp. We actually lived for like 1 year, I think, on that, and I'd run through the woods and stuff. My parents helped out with the camp and stuff. That 1 year, and bikes. I mean, I used to be into bikes quite a bit. All those things. I think in every young man. And that's why I think too why video games are so popular with young guys, because we like the adventure. We like to go pretend that we're gladiators or that we're Black Ops or whatever, and that's why it's so appealing to us. Adventure movies, you know, like all the superhero movies. I would say most of those guys, for the most part, are really drawn to those type of things.
Well, then again, girls do like Thor a lot, so.
Girls do, yes. Might be for a different reason, but yes. They like
That's
Thor.
not for the action.
That's right.
Or
Could be.
It's for the accent, not for the action. Okay. Now, from time to time, these type of things can get us men into trouble. That's where that mischief side of guys comes from. Sometimes we like the adventure and the risk of doing something we know is wrong, and we're going to try not to get caught. But when this is disciplined and channeled properly, I believe it can be used to raise up each one of us to be true warriors for the Lord. Someone who fights for what is good and what is godly in the world. All right. And I'm going to share a story of a young man named David. We started off with a story of him. I think we're going to have 3 stories of David before we're done here. So you should have it there. You can follow along as you read, and Sarah has it on the overheads. Now the Philistines, these were the enemies of Israel, mustered their army for battle and camped between Succoth in Judah and Azekah in Ephes-Dammim. Sorry. Saul, who was the king of Israel, countered by gathering his Israelite troops near the valley of Elah. So the Philistines and Israelites faced each other on opposite hills with the valley between them. Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was heavy and thick like a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor-bearer walked ahead of him, carrying a shield. Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. "Why are you all coming out to fight?" he called. "I am the Philistine champion, but you are only servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me, and if he kills me, then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me." And Saul and his Israelites heard this. They were terrified and deeply shaken. Apparently nobody wanted to go fight the 9-foot guy. You know, that's not even a fair fight. They don't even, you guys are like, if someone's like 7 pounds out of your weight class, right? Because Isaac boxes, and so does Ethan. You just like, how many pounds are the weight classes?
I think it goes by like 10.
10 pounds.
Like it goes by 10s.
Yeah, by 10. So if somebody's like 10 pounds over, they can't fight each other in boxing.
Well, a guy that's 130 and 140, they can't go against each other.
Right.
A guy that's 130 and 135, they can.
Right, so there's that, but if it's more than a 10-pound difference, they really can't, right?
Yeah.
You can't fight each other. Right, this guy's got 3 feet on the next guy, and he's not as skinny. Like, didn't have just like some weird growth disorders where he's like, you know, a tall beanpole. This guy's obviously pretty huge because of all the armor he's wearing, you know, 125-pound, whatever. It's like, if you're 9 feet, you have to wear the 125-pound armor as well. Why don't you just give the other guy some sort of an advantage, or some sort of, you know, even the playing field? But no, so he's taunting him then. Not even looking for a fair fight. Okay, now David was a son of a man named Jesse. And really, attempt to put yourself into the picture, into David's shoes here at this point. Okay, just imagine being David, okay? Now David was the son of a man named Jesse, an Ephrathite from Bethlehem, in the land of Judah. Jesse was an old man at that time, and he had 8 sons. Jesse's 3 oldest sons, Eliab, Abinadab, and Shimei, were already had already joined Saul's army to fight the Philistines. David was the youngest son. David's 3 oldest brothers stayed with Saul's army, but David went back and forth so he could help his father with the sheep in Bethlehem. For 40 days, every morning and evening, the Philistine champion strutted in front of the Israelite army. One day, Jesse said to David, "Take this basket of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread, and carry them quickly to your brothers. Give these 10 cuts of cheese to their captain." Cut some cheese for the... Apparently that was supposed to win his favor or something, I don't know. Traditions have changed these days. See how your brothers are getting along and bring back a report of how they're doing. So David left with the sheep with another shepherd and set out early the next morning with the gifts as Jesse had directed him. He arrived at the camp just as the Israelite army was leaving for battle, with shouts and battle cries. So the Israelite and Philistine forces stood facing each other, army against army. David left his things with the keeper of supplies and hurried out to the ranks to greet his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath the Philistine, champion from Gath, came out from the Philistine ranks. Then David heard him shout his usual taunt to the army of Israel. As soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away in fright. "Have you seen the giant?" the men asked. "He comes out each day to defy Israel. The king has offered a huge reward to anyone who kills him. He will give that man one of his daughters for a wife, and the man's entire family will be exempt from paying taxes." Guess who that daughter was that is going to be hidden? What's that? No, we talked about her last night actually, but we'll get there. David asked the soldiers standing nearby, who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God? What I like there is David wasn't offended for Israel's sake. He was offended for God's sake. He says he's defying God. He's not just defying Israel, he's defying God. That was really cool, the correlation David made there. But when David's oldest brother, Eliab, heard David talking to the men, he was angry. "What are you doing around here anyway?" he demanded. "What about these few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and deceit. You just want to see the battle." You got the older brother talking down to the younger one. "Hey, look, the men here are taking care of battle. Why don't you go home and take care of the sheep, little boy?" You would never see an older brother talking down to that. Never, no. Okay. I mean, it's kind of funny. You can just see the sibling rivalry coming out here. He's like, you just want to see a battle. "What have I done now?" David replied. He probably did that. He might not have hit puberty yet, so it probably was that. "What have I done now?" David replied. "I was only asking a question." He walked over to some others and asked them the same thing and received the same answer. Then David's question was reported to King Saul, and the king sent for him. So David walks into the king, right? And I like this about this, at least how the Bible records it. The king didn't even start the conversation. David did. Typically, you maybe wait for the king to ask you a question. No, David walks in and says, "Hey, don't worry about the Philistine." David told him, "I'll go fight him. I'm a shepherd. I got this." Right? Yep. It's okay. It's okay. I'm a limo driver. Anybody name the movie?
What?
It's okay. I'm a limo driver.
Oh,
Dumb and Dumber. There you go. Good job. Good job. I had some candy.
we were talking about that movie this morning.
Were you?
He goes, "You want to turn on the radio?"
Yep. It's kind of the picture there. It's like, no, nobody worry. I got it. I got the big guy. I got him. I'm a shepherd.
It doesn't really.
Yeah, I know. I was like, all right, but here, listen to this. Listen to this, though.
I'm 90.
It gets good. I know most of you probably heard the story, but it's pretty good. "Don't be ridiculous," Saul replied. "There is no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You are only a boy. He's been a man of war since his youth." But David persisted. "I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats." See, right there. I got my shepherd. I got
He's
it.
acting like that's like
Yeah.
an arm.
He's like some UFC fight.
I know. But then listen, it gets a little better though. He says, "When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after him with a club, and I rescue the lamb from its mouth. And if the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death."
How old is he?
9.
Speculation, I think he has him in his later teens. I think what people guess is right around 16 in there. 16, 17, 18.
Yeah.
About there.
Maybe.
We said a youth.
He's a youth. And that, when they use that term, because typically in that culture, men, by the time they're later teens were men, they'd get married and stuff at that point, and because they didn't have like 18 years of school to go through like we do, like junior high, high school, college, masters, all those things. for them, it was basically you just became the career that your parents had. So as you grow up, you learn that career, and by 18, you're ready to farm your land and raise a family. What's that?
VeggieTales Junior is like a 7-year-old.
Yep. Yep.
I don't think he has it.
What's that?
He brought pizzas.
Okay.
I don't think
All right. Well, let's keep going here. Let's keep going here. So anyway, he takes the lion, he takes the bear by the jaw, and what's he do?
Clubs it to death.
Catch it by the jaw and clubs it to death. Now that's kind of bold. If you guys have ever seen like a lion or bear up close, like probably not not alive, but like if you go to like even places where they have the animals that have been killed and then they stuff them. Have you ever seen like a brown bear up close? Those things just look wickedly vicious. I mean, they're
It's gotta been like some little black bear. It couldn't have been a grizzly.
Best facial ever.
I've been to Chico
What's that?
I used to work at Como Zoo, and we had two
Yeah.
Kodiaks and a black.
Yeah. Kodiaks are beasts.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, if you look at their face like up close, a Kodiak bear is at least nice and symmetrical, you know, it's actually kind of a beautiful animal. A brown bear, they're just ugly, they're like kind of almost like the orcs. I mean, their teeth aren't necessarily straight, they're kind of like angled. And it's just like, I would not want to mess with one of those bears. Anyway, he catches him by the mouth and clubs him to death. I mean, that's saying something.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was like a cub.
What's that?
Baby bear. Baby brown.
It could have been. He didn't make it sound. I mean, the ones that go out and do the hunting are probably typically, I think, the adult ones, yeah. Okay. All right, so I club it to death. All right, and I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do the same to this pagan Philistine too, for he has, and here we go again, defied the living God. David wasn't even concerned that he was defying Israel. He said, he is defying God. And the difference is if this guy is defying God, then who's going to be on David's side? God is. And that's where David's confidence came from. I think it's a pretty cool thing. He has defied the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, may the Lord be with you. And then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet, and a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped on the sword over it, and took a step to see what it was like, for he had never worn such things before. And then he says, I can't go in these, I'm not used to them. So David's there in his shepherd gear, which probably just means normal clothes, puts on some armor to go for a fight, and then says, you know what, I can't take these, I'm not used to them. So David takes off the armor to go fight this guy, and he picks up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them in his shepherd's bag, and then armed with only his shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. Now, David picks up 5 stones. Anybody have an idea, I guess why he took 5 stones?
Because he might miss.
He might miss. That's the thought. Maybe if he missed the first time. Although, if the giant's got a spear and you miss him once, you might not have a second chance. But it could be it.
Maybe like
I actually heard other stories about the 5 stones, 4 or 5 different giants that he would be facing.
Okay.
That's what I heard.
I think what you're thinking of is Goliath actually had 4 brothers. So, some people think that that he knew that, and that he had 5 stones, planning just in case the brothers came, he was going to take them out too.
It's like an assassin.
He
5 bullets.
He was. Yeah, there's another place in Scripture. It's in Chronicles, and we can look that up where it says Goliath, whatever from Gath or whatever, who had 4. I'm sorry, he had 4 brothers. Did I say 5 brothers? He had 4. Okay, 4 brothers, so there was 5 of them total. Yep. And we can look that up later. So that's the speculation. I think that's what, and I think they were all giants. I think they were all from a family of big people. But that's what we heard. There's no need to proof either way, but that's what people think. So anyway, he picks up 5 stones and he starts across to fight the Philistines. So if you're placing bets, who are you putting your money on at this point?
David.
Oh, you are.
if you were there,
I'm going with the shepherd.
I'm going with the
Can you imagine?
He clubs grizzly bears to death.
Dude, he does.
Who would believe? But who would believe that?
Yeah, I know, but who just ask a good point. Who necessarily would believe that he really actually
Who would
killed
believe that
the
Clancy would get
What?
hold of Grizzly's mouth and
I really think
Yeah.
grab it, but I don't
Can you make how much they fawn?
Yourself.
I hope you did. Yeah, club it to death. Okay, so anyway, if you're the army of Israel and you're watching this, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh. Okay, so Goliath walks out toward David with his shield bearer ahead of him, sneering with contempt in his ruddy face at the boys. Am I a dog, he roared at David, that you come to me with a stick? And he cursed David by the names of his gods. Come over here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals, Goliath yelled. David replied to the Philistines, you come at me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you defied. And I'm sure at that point Saul was really scared. He's probably thinking, I'll take my spear over your God any day. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will cut off your head. And when I give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel, and everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with the sword or spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. And as Goliath moved closer, David quickly ran out to meet him, reaching into his shepherd's bag and taking out a stone. He hurled it with a sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in, so that was a pretty hard shot, and Goliath stumbled and fell down, face down on the ground. And then David goes over with Goliath's own sword, took it out of his sheath and cut off his head. Pretty solid day for David. So it was obvious from a young age that David was destined to be a warrior. And I would even guess that for some of you, your destiny is already beginning to reveal itself. And actually, this upcoming week at Lyghthouse, we have some pretty cool things, and we're probably going to show you, we're going to talk about some things, and you're probably going to already see that your destiny, what you're called to be, destined to be, what God has planned for you, Clancy and Josiah and all you young men, God has already started to stir that up within you. David's confidence was in the Lord, not in his own ability. David didn't run at him and say, hey, look, I took out the bear and the lion, so I'm going to take you out too. It was always, God help me take out the bear and the lion. And because he was with me there, I know he's going to be with me here. David's confidence was in the Lord, not in his own ability. And there's oftentimes, just in my life, we're getting to do some ministry. Even when I was prepping this, putting this together, I had a lot of work. I put a lot of work into it, but I was looking over, it's like, I don't know, God, if this is, it isn't good enough. You know, it's like there's a lot of things I want to say, but I don't feel like I've said it well. And God's had to remind me, hey, you speak what I've given you, I'll do the ministry. I'll impact the people that are listening. And I trust, you know what, this week, it's not going to be me that's ministering. If you're inspired to follow the Lord, it's going to be God ministering through me. Okay? David saw injustice as God being defied, not just as people suffering. And I want to take just a minute here to explain this to you. A lot of times, you know, we can see videos of people suffering in other nations, people starving, people without water, people trapped in the sex trade industry. And even other people that aren't Christians can be moved with compassion to want to help those people. But the one thing we have as Christians, we see something totally different. Not just are these people being mistreated. When you're at school and you see people being made fun of, it's not just those people being made fun of. In all of that, God is being defied. And that's the worst thing. When somebody's making fun, putting someone down, another person, what they're doing is they're putting down God's creation. And does it hurt the other person? Yes. Does it hurt God even more? Yes, it does. And just an example would be if some parents had a young child, and say the child was attacked maybe and beaten or abused by somebody. Would it hurt the child? Yes, it would. Physically and emotionally, it would hurt them. But the parents, it would break their hearts far more for the parents to see that happening to their child than it would even hurt the child itself. Because the child will eventually, they'll grow up and they'll probably get over it. The parents, they'll carry that hurt with them for a long time, knowing their child was hurt like that. Awesome. To go into battle is to risk everything. The mission is all that matters. When soldiers go off to war, there's a saying they have, like the general might say to them, guys, this mission we're going out on, great risk. The odds are against us in this situation. It's possible that you may not return. And soldiers have a saying, we're going to go because we're already dead. In other words, they decided that they will give their lives for the mission. They have decided this is more important. They've left their life behind. They realize the fact they may never return. They consider themselves already dead, and then they go into battle fearless because they have nothing to lose, because in their mind they're already dead. And that's why Jesus even says, take up your cross. You know, to take up a cross means to die. If you're going to follow him, you really need to die to yourself. Okay? A warrior gives up his rights to live peacefully. We could stay at home. When America goes to war, some of us have the privilege from staying back, and we get to watch the war on TV. We get to live peacefully while they're out defending our country, or attacking other countries so that they don't have to defend our country. Either way you want to look at it. We give our rights to live peacefully. The soldiers, however, they go into battle. A warrior is someone who abandons mediocrity and rises to excellence. We talked about being typical lately, or yesterday. We talked about being typical. A warrior is someone who says, you know what, I'm not going to be typical. I'm not going to just go with the flow. I'm not going to get into all the mischievous and lustful activities that my friends do. I am going to choose to live excellently, even if that means I might not be accepted by everyone, or even if it means I get mocked or made fun of. A warrior stands his ground no matter what the cost. Even if it costs your life, even if it costs your popularity, no matter, the warrior will stand. I have a video here it's an I Am Second video. I've shown a few of these before at Lyghthouse. I've got one of a guy named Remy Adeleke, who was involved in gangs growing up, and then got into, I think it's Navy SEALs. I think it's about an 8-minute video or so, and I just talks about his experience as a warrior, as a thug, and then as a warrior. I think you'll enjoy this, and I'll have a few thoughts to wrap things up with. Now let me ask this: what is the difference between a thug / gangsta and a soldier? Gangsta. What would you say? Different. They both carry guns. They both fight. They both go into battles, so to speak. What is the difference? For the Lord. Yeah, did I put that in there?
No.
Oh, okay.
Not for the Lord.
Yeah.
Fighting for something.
Yeah, they fight for
purpose.
A reason.
Yep, I had two things actually. The soldiers are submitted to authority, which I think is a big thing. They respect, and ultimately, the soldiers respect the authority of the government. But then a soldier also fights exactly what you said. I put it right here. Soldier fights for greater than something for himself, as where the thug just fights for himself.
Wait, what did you want us to put in the blanket there? Both are fighters.
Well, if Sarah's following along, she probably has a. Is there a next slide now?
The next one you're doing is being a warrior doesn't mean you will carry a gun.
Okay, what does the blank say?
Both are fighters, but the soldier is blank and he fights for something greater.
Oh, submitted to authority. Oh, okay, interesting. I didn't have that in a little discrepancy. Okay, awesome. Soldier submitted to authority. Yep. Being a warrior doesn't mean you will carry a gun or a sword, but you will take a stand for what is good and against what is evil. But like I said, I'm not trying to convince all of you to join the army, the military. Actually, that's something I wouldn't consider to do. I think I wouldn't encourage you to do unless you felt that's where God was leading you. That's not the war that ultimately we'll be fighting. But we will take a stand as men and women for what is good and against what is evil. Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, I think a lot of you know the story. They were worshipers of God, and in the country that they lived in passed a law that you can't worship any other god but the king Nebuchadnezzar, and if you do and we catch you worshiping someone else, we're going to throw you into this big fiery furnace. And anyway, they were caught worshiping, praying to God, and they were brought before the king, and he said, hey, look, bow to me, or I'm going to throw you in this fiery furnace. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us, and he will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that he will never serve your gods or worship the golden statue you have set up. And they said, you know what, hey, God is God. We're submitted to him. We're going to take a stand here, even if it costs our life. We're going to stand for what's right. But I like how they did it. They did it respectfully. Even in that, even in an immoral, ungodly king, they still referred to him as your majesty. They gave him the respect, the earthly respect that he had. That's cool. The first battle that every warrior must learn to fight is with, anybody got an idea?
Sin.
Now, sin's a good one. It's not what I have. That would be a good answer, but it's something else I'm looking for. Who's sin?
Yourself?
With himself. Yep. Yep. We will. That's going to be the first major struggle we'll ever fight with, is our own sinful nature. And if we never overcome that, we'll never be able to fight for anything else. If we can't control our own, if we can't allow God to help us control our own, we'll never fight anything else. He will resist. Let's hold on here. He's got a couple thoughts. He will resist temptations to do evil. Or the question is, will he resist to do temptations to do evil like the typical lustful male characters and submit to God? Will you be lazy when it comes to helping others, especially in the early years of your life around the house with your mother who loves you dearly and carried you for 9 months? Will you just go with the flow and do whatever your friends are doing at school, or will you dare to be different? Will you treat your mother and other women with respect, or will you just use your strength and toughness to bully them? You know, some guys, as they get in their teenage years, the testosterone gets going, and where we become tougher and dominant than the females around us. And I've seen young men bully their mothers just by bossing them around. And it's not pretty, it's not cool, it's not respectful. Will you discipline yourself to truly get to know God, rather than just to be a good person and fit into society? Or will you take that step to go beyond just the average goodness of people around you? God uses the battlefield to perfect the warrior.